Pronto.
What is it particularly about the Chinese rule?
Agora eu vou olhar.
Number one, all your freedoms, right? Because Taiwan has been enjoying, our democracy,
Eu vou olhar
our freedoms for the past few decades, and it
celular e ver o que aparece aqui.
unified with authoritarian regime and then surrender such freedoms. So no, it's not an option.
No celular,
And many other Taiwanese, the crackdown on democracy in nearby Hong Kong is a warning of what may be to come.
eu ouço a minha voz.
Basic right to vote, to elect their officials.
Não quero ouvir minha voz. Cortar minha voz. Cortar.
Hong Kong people just live under fear every single day. So we all hope that.
Microfone totalmente para a esquerda.
The second largest army in the world.
Microfone do zero.
China is increasingly vocal about bringing what it views as a renegade province to heel, stepping up its
E
warnings
também
to the rest
aumentou o
of the world
volume
not
do
to meddle
YouTube.
in its business.
请坐下。谁妄想这样干？
Eu tenho que cortar o meu
Who dares
som.
try to do that will have their heads bashed bloody against the Great Wall of Steel, forged by over one.
Ok, no computador eu marco monitor off.
President Xi Jinping's hard line at the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party in July
DB18
was followed by a record
19,
number
eu quero
of
esse.
Chinese fighter
Eu
planes
quero ele a
breaching
zero.
Taiwanese airspace, more than 150 incursions over just a 4-day period. The question is, if China does make a move on Taiwan, will the US respond? Right now, the answer seems to be yes.
I just want to make China understand that we are not going to step back. We are not going to change any of our views.
So are you saying that that the United States would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked?
Yes, we have a commitment to do that.
Those who want to block China's unification with China's Taiwan
Está zero.
will be doomed to failure.
Victor Gao is an expert in Chinese affairs and an unofficial mouthpiece.
Mesmo sem dar som,
Beijing.
muito delay, mas dá
Vice
som.
President of the Center for China and Globalization think tank. He's a former diplomat who was the interpreter for
No
communist leader
computador eu
Deng
vou
Xiaoping.
zero. Pronto,
The US
zero.
And China's Taiwan, then you are talking about the worst thing you can dream of. A war between China and the United States will soon escalate out of control, and that
Zerou
will
o
be
som.
Armageddon, and Armageddon.
Zerou
And
microfone,
this
zerou
is
som, zerou
what I
tudo.
hope the Australian people will come to realize, that you need to deal with China with
Não é o
respect
caminho.
as much as you give to the United States.
Building your own custom
Voltei.
home or turning your existing
Propaganda,
house into your
corta
dream home
propaganda,
can be one
corta,
of
corta
life's
propaganda.
Through simulated invasions, China has been
Estou
showing
no
off the
OBS.
military might it could
Properties.
unleash if Taiwan puts up a fight. At the sprawling Zuriha training base in Inner Mongolia, troops are schooled in street-to-street combat in a mock Taipei.
Agora eu vou marcar o do meio,
From these satellite
monitor
images
only.
and from these
puta.
Few have a handle on the strategic perils.
Fundamentally, power that they have now. Taiwan, okay. Well, you can happily go back. In Japan, in South Korea,
China starts targeting US military assets, surely then it's a very slippery slope towards all-out nuclear war.
Monitor
No, I
off,
don't believe that's
totalmente
the
off.
case. America would be foolish, even though it may have
Monitor
suffered a
totalmente
tactical
off.
defeat, to use nuclear weapons because it would start losing American cities.
It's a terrifying prospect, the two biggest powers in the world going toe-to-toe. But as you'll see, there are strong reasons to believe war is not as
Bom, o som tá muito bom. O som sai do rod no speaker.
A quarry on the northern outskirts of Melbourne seems an unlikely testing ground for the weapons of tomorrow. But here, a war game in miniature is underway.
Agora eu vou marcar o meu microfone para o que eu gosto. 111.
Defentex is a Victorian company developing autonomous drones for the battlefield.
Mexendo no botão do rod.
Travis Reddy, who believes
Botão do rod.
So that we can have this big impact in the battlefield.
How much are your developments made for the sole purpose of helping a country with a small defence force like
O
Australia?
botão do
take on
rod
a
do
big
microfone
force
aumenta o
like China?
volume,
That's ultimately the
mas
reason
causa
that we
vibração.
exist.
Each tiny flying machine can carry a power.
A radio retransmission system.
But their real strength comes when they swarm. One time, what can they actually achieve?
Yeah, they can have a devastating effect.
It's early days yet, but increasingly cheap autonomous
Pra
drones
esquerda,
are
dei
being
todo.
viewed as a key to modern warfare, particularly for nations like Australia.
We're a very small country. We have a very small defence force. So we have to maximise the impact that every individual soldier can have.
So this could be a big tactical advantage for the little guy.
100%.
And I want to thank that fellow down under. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it, Mr. Prime Minister.
Right now, of course, Australia's focus is
Repetindo,
on
está
much
marcado
bigger
monitor
military
off.
hardware that'll result from the AUKUS Pact.
DB11.
It'll be a couple of decades yet before the cementing of the relationship with our two most trusted allies results in shiny new nuclear submarines. Former Major General Jim Molan fears that's far too late.
It's excellent to have something out there in the future, 10, 20 years
Cadeira lá
away.
atrás.
The
Lá
question
atrás da
I've got
cadeira.
is, what are we going to do for the next war? And the next war is not going to be 10 or 20 years away. It's going to be in the next 3 to 10 years. My estimate is, in a serious fight, the Australian Defence Force only has enough missiles for days. This is not going to be resolved in days. And of course, we're not big enough. We should expand the Defence Force significantly.
It's a pretty bleak picture you paint. It sounds like we're stuffed.
I don't think being stuffed is a strategic word that I've used very often, but it's not bad. We should fund defence now based on our assessment of the national security strategy, which is based on the war that we want to win.
In short, do you think Australia needs to prepare for war tomorrow?
Absolutely.
One thing is clear. While Australia's new subs will be nuclear powered, they won't be carrying nuclear warheads. But veteran Communist Party loyalist Victor Gao says Australia has already crossed the nuclear line.
No volume, segundo botão está no 1.
Deal in itself, by enabling Australia to build nuclear submarines, will have one big consequence
bater lá
for
longe na
Australia.
cadeira.
That is, Australia will no
Vou bater
longer
lá
enjoy the
longe na
benefit
cadeira.
and the very rare privilege of not being targeted with nuclear weapons going forward.
I think you're comparing oranges and apples there. Australia is doing a deal for nuclear powered subs. They're not getting nuclear weapons. Why should Australia then be a target of nuclear weapons?
Listen to me. The tubes in a submarine can be armed with both nuclear warheads and conventional warheads. Now, in the heat of a battle, or in
Não
the heat
está
of a
mal,
war,
mas eu não
do
tenho
you think Australia will allow
barulho na cozinha.
inspection as to what kind of warhead you put into that big tube? I can bet you, in the heat of battle, no one will pause. And the safe
Repetindo.
approach is to target
Últimos 5
Australia
minutos.
as a nuclear-armed country.
Senior figures in China have said that because Australia has entered into the AUKUS
Rod,
agreement,
o volume
that
está no
it is now a
2
target
e o
for
microfone
nuclear
está para a
weapons.
esquerda 1.
Do you think that's just bluff and bluster?
I would call that bluff and bluster in that category specifically.
Lá no Properties está monitor off,
From overseeing the
1.1
most powerful
dB.
naval fleet on Earth, Richard Spencer prefers a quieter life these days. As former Secretary of the US Navy under Donald Trump, he watched China's military power and belligerence grow. But he's cautiously optimistic that tensions won't spill into all-out war.
You know, China, I don't believe
Eu vou
it's
repetir algum barulho
looking for a
lá
fight,
no
specifically a
cadeira.
fight. It wants to flex its muscles, but look what happened in the Cold War with Russia. I mean, we managed many hot friction points, and it never went to a kinetic state.
What do you mean by kinetic?
You start firing rounds downrange.
And how likely do you think that is?
Com o microfone Rod no esquerda para a esquerda 1.
Because it does no one any good.
During the Cold War, mutually assured
Mudei pra
destruction
direita
prevented
1.
conflict as both sides feared the consequences of the other's nuclear arsenal. But Richard Spencer believes war will be prevented this time by a different threat of destruction, economic. In this modern,
Vou para a esquerda
globalized
totalmente
world,
para o 0. Skip. Voltando pro OBS. Microfone do Rod
You can't simply cut the line.
passando para a direita 1.
Simply have some sort of knee-jerk reaction without unintended consequences.
I guess that's where this situation is so
O
unique
volume
compared
aumentou.
to wars
Todo
of
o volume
past
que
eras, because
aumentou e
back
o
then
eco
countries were
acabou.
self-sufficient, and now it is such a globalized economy that it's
Bater
a
na
completely
cadeira.
different landscape.
Completely different
Vou
landscape.
bater na cadeira. Tá bem alto
Financially
aqui.
intertwined, trade intertwined. That matrix that you described right there, the complexity of it, I would say is the safety gate for, you know, all-out war.
Australia's relationship with China is just as intertwined. And given that, the former head of the US Navy believes
O microfone está para a direita 1. Agora eu vou lá na cozinha, vou bater na cozinha. Vou bater lá, barulho.
Morally opposed to any Chinese aggression. Is there an argument to say that perhaps it's not worth it for Australia and the United States to get involved in that?
I'm simply a citizen, but I would have to ask the question of my, government leadership. Can we think long and hard about this? Knowing the scenarios, they're quite difficult. It would be a question that has to be asked.
Is it kind of a case of you don't want to get involved in a war that you know you're probably not going to win?
It's a very problematic situation in that regard. You have to think about what the results are at what cost.
But Jim
minuto atrás eu estava na cozinha, minuto atrás. Aqui o volume está bem alto. Eu tenho ambos, à direita, Rod, no Rod, à direita, 1.
And the Americans might say what we said to Taiwan. Where do you draw the line? This situation that's developing now is an existential threat to Australia as a liberal democracy.
Australia has entered into the AUKUS agreement that it is now a target for nuclear weapons. Do you think that's just bluff and bluster?
I would call that bluff and
Para
bluster.
terminar, eu repito,
In that category, specifically.
o Rod está Serap. Os dois para a direita, 1.
Naval fleet on Earth. Richard Spencer prefers a quieter life these days.
Em Properties, no computador, eu tenho monitor off e tenho DB11.
Military power and belligerence grow, but he's cautiously optimistic that tensions won't spill into all-out war.
China, I don't believe, is quote-unquote looking for a fight specifically to fight. It wants to flex its muscles, but look what happened in the Cold War with Russia. We managed many hot friction points, and it never went to a kinetic state.
What do you mean by kinetic?
You start firing rounds downrange.
How likely do you think that is?
I would hope that that's a far probability, because it does no one any good.
During the Cold War, mutually assured destruction prevented conflict.
Tá tudo saindo no meu speaker. Tá saindo no speaker do Rod bem alto.
War will be prevented this time by a different threat of destruction: economic. In this modern, globalized world, China and the US are each other's largest trading partners, so in reality, highly dependent on each other.
It's a very interesting symbiotic relationship when you trade and have very meaningful commodities traded with your competitor. You can't simply cut the line.
Aí vem barulho na cozinha. Agora vai ter muito barulho na cozinha.
I guess that's where this situation is so unique compared to wars of past eras, because back then countries were self-sufficient, and now it is such a globalized economy that it's a completely different landscape.
Completely different landscape. Financially intertwined, trade intertwined. That matrix that you described right there, the complexity of it,
the bishop today?
I would say is the safety gate for,
No, I gotta tell you, look.